The Old Man's Identity. Chapter 1. The Accident. When they got to the hospital, the old man was rushed to the theater immediately, while Jia Li sat in the corridor to wait. Her heart raced with anxiety as she glanced at the closed doors of the operating room, praying for the old man's safety. She felt helpless, trapped in a moment of uncertainty, wishing she could do something more than just sit and wait. Jia Li struggled with her emotions. Anger bubbled beneath the surface as she thought about the families of the old man. How could they let him drive himself at this hour? The thought gnawed at her, but as she sat there, a sense of responsibility began to take hold. What if they were worried? What if they didn't know what had happened? Chapter 2. The Wallet. With these thoughts swirling in her mind like waves crashing against the shore, Jia Li suddenly remembered the wallet she had picked up from the ground at the scene of the accident. She rummaged through her pockets, first pulling out her cell phone, and then, with a sigh of relief, finding the brown leather wallet nestled in her other pocket. A pang of guilt washed over her. Is it right to search through someone else's property without permission? She wasn't a police officer. She was just a girl trying to do the right thing. But the urgency of the situation pushed her to act. She needed to see if there was a way to contact the old man's family. Opening the wallet, she found an ID card. It was a resident identity card, which meant there might not be any contact information for relatives. With trembling hands, she examined the details. The man's surname was Fu, and there was a Gen before it, indicating a possible military background. Is he a soldier? She wondered, intrigued. As she continued to read, she discovered his resident address. A small smile crept onto her face, thinking she might find answers. But that smile quickly faded when she saw the address. It was located in City X, a far-off place from the countryside where they were currently situated. She had never even heard of the name before. What is this grandfather doing here alone when he has a house in such a nice city? Jia Li pondered, tucking the ID card back into her pocket. Disappointment settled in her chest like a heavy stone. The distance felt insurmountable, and she realized she had no way to reach out to his family. Chapter 3. Waiting. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, Jia Li momentarily forgot to call home to inform her father she would be late. Her gaze remained locked on the doors, each second stretching into an eternity. The sterile smell of the hospital mixed with the anxiety in her chest, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Suddenly, she heard hurried footsteps approaching. Jia Li looked up to see a familiar figure rushing toward her. "Mum," she called out softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jia Li, are you hurt?" The older woman, clad in a nurse's uniform, rushed to her side, worry etched across her face as she scanned her daughter for injuries. "Mum, I'm fine," Jia Li assured her, though she felt dizzy from the adrenaline and the shaking. "You scared me to death, but are you sure you're okay?" Her mother's voice was filled with concern, eyes searching for any sign of distress. "Yes, Mum, I'm fine. It's the grandfather I came in with that is injured. He is in the theater now," Jia Li explained, pointing at the tightly shut doors of the operating room. "What happened? How come you are with an injured grandfather?" Her mother's sharp gaze bore into her, demanding answers. Jia Li hesitated, fear creeping in. She had taken a significant risk, and now she had to explain herself. But she knew there was no point in hiding the truth. Taking a deep breath, she recounted the events leading up to the accident, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. You. What if you got in trouble? Do you know the kind of situation you could have gotten yourself into with a hit-and-run accident? Her mother's voice rose, a mix of anger and fear. Mum, I was only trying to save a life," Jia Li cried out, stepping back slightly, feeling cornered. "You were trying to save a life when you would have gotten our family in trouble?" Her mother's tone was sharp, a warning laced in her words. "But you taught me that saving lives was important and should be a daily act," Jia Li reminded her, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Her mother fell silent, momentarily speechless. The truth of her daughter's words hung in the air. If the roles were reversed, she would have rushed to help without a second thought. But the instinct to protect her child clashed with the values she had instilled in her. "Next time, don't just rush to help people in this type of situation. You have to be careful and call the police, she finally said, her voice softer as she sank onto a nearby bench. Yes, Mum, but how did you know I was here? Jiali asked, curiosity overtaking her anxiety. Nurse Lee informed me she saw you come in with the ambulance. I was so scared, thinking something might have happened to you. But it's good that you are okay, her mother replied, relief flooding her features. Oh, Mum, I was supposed to make dinner for Dad, but I got caught up with something, Jiali said, attempting to lighten the mood with a smile. Her mother shot her a glare. I will make the call, she said before stepping out to contact her husband. Chapter 5, The Police Arrive. As her mother stepped out, a group of uniformed officers approached Jia Li. They introduced themselves, and one of the policemen asked, Hello, miss. We are here to gather a statement regarding the hit-and-run incident involving Mr. Fu. Just as Jia Li was about to respond, her mother returned, blocking her from the view of the policemen protectively. Excuse me, officers, her mother said, her tone firm. I'm a nurse at this hospital, and this is my daughter. I'll be handling this. The officers exchanged glances, surprised but respectful of the mother's authority. Of course, ma'am. We just need to ask her a few questions regarding the incident. Jia Li watched as her mother spoke to the officers, her heart racing. She felt a mix of relief and apprehension. On one hand, she wanted to help the police with their investigation, but on the other, she didn't want to get into trouble for her involvement. Jia Li, stay close, her mother instructed, turning back to her. You don't need to say anything until I'm sure it's safe. Chapter 6, The Statement. After a brief discussion, her mother turned back to the officers. Can you please give us a moment? I'd like to speak with my daughter privately. The officers nodded, stepping aside but remaining close enough to hear. Jia Li's mother knelt down beside her, looking her in the eye. Listen, sweetie, I know you wanted to help, and I'm proud of you for that, but we need to be careful. You can't just rush into things without thinking of the consequences. Jia Li nodded, feeling the weight of her mother's words. I understand, Mum, I didn't want him to be alone. Her mother's expression softened. I know, and that's what makes you special. Just promise me you'll be more cautious next time. I promise, Jia Li said, her voice earnest. The officers returned, and her mother stood up. Thank you for your patience. My daughter is ready to give her statement now. Chapter 7, The Statement. Jia Li took a deep breath as she faced the officers. They were professional and kind, asking her questions that helped them piece together the events of the accident. She recounted everything she could remember, from the moment she saw the old man's car to the frantic scene that followed. As she spoke, she caught glimpses of her mother watching her, a mix of pride and concern on her face. When she finished, the officers thanked her for her cooperation and assured her that they would do everything possible to find the person responsible for the hit and run. Is there anything else you'd like to add? One of the officers asked gently. Jia Li hesitated, her thoughts drifting back to the wallet. Actually, I found his wallet at the scene. I have it with me. The officers exchanged looks, intrigued. That could be helpful. Can we take a look at it? Jia Li nodded and handed over the wallet, her heart racing. She watched as they examined the contents, noting the ID card and the address. City X, huh? One of the officers remarked. That's quite a distance from here. Yes, Jia Li replied, feeling a sense of urgency. I was hoping to contact his family, but I don't know how. The officer nodded thoughtfully. We can look into that for you. We'll make sure his family is informed about what happened. Chapter 8, The Aftermath. As the officers wrapped up their questions, Jia Li felt a mix of relief and anxiety. She had done what she could, but the uncertainty of the old man's fate weighed heavily on her heart. Her mother placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. You did well, Jia Li. I'm proud of you for being brave and helping. Thanks, Mum, Jia Li replied, feeling grateful for her mother's support. After the officers left, they sat together in silence, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken thoughts. Jia Li's mind raced with questions about the old man, who he was, why he was alone, and what would happen next. I wish I could do more, she finally said, breaking the silence. You've done plenty already, her mother reassured her. Sometimes, all we can do is wait and hope for the best. Dashtar Chapter 9, A New Resolve. As time passed, Jia Li found herself reflecting on the day's events. The experience had been overwhelming, yet it ignited a fire within her. She wanted to make a difference, not just in moments of crisis, but in everyday life. "I want to help people, Mum," she said, determination in her voice. "I want to become a nurse like you." They turned to her, surprise flickering in their eyes. "Yes, we are. Who are you?" one of them asked, concern evident in their voice. With newfound resolve, Jia Li began to think about her future. She would pursue her dreams and make a difference in the lives of others, just as she had tried to do for the old man. Chapter 10: The Call. Later that evening, as they returned home, Jia Li's phone buzzed with a message. It was from one of the officers, updating her on the situation. They had contacted the old man's family and they were on their way to the hospital. Jia Li's heart raced with anticipation. She felt a sense of relief knowing that the old man would not be alone. His family would be there for him, and she hoped they would find comfort in each other during this difficult time. "Mom, they contacted his family," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "They're coming to the hospital." Her mother smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "That's good news, Jia Li. You did the right thing." Chapter 11: The Reunion. As they arrived at the hospital the next day, Jia Li was filled with a mix of anxiety and hope. She wanted to see the old man, to know he was okay, but she also wanted to meet his family. In the waiting area, she spotted a group of people gathered, their faces etched with worry. Jia Li recognized the old man's family from the pictures on the ID card. They looked anxious, searching for answers. Gathering her courage, Jia Li approached them. "Excuse me, are you Mr. Fu's family?" she asked softly. They turned to her, surprise flickering in their eyes. "Yes, we are. Who are you?" one of them asked, concern evident in their voice. "I'm Jia Li. I was with your grandfather when the accident happened. I found his wallet and contacted the police," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. Tears filled the eyes of one of the women. "Thank you for being with him. We were so worried." Jia Li felt a wave of relief wash over her. "He's in surgery right now, but I hope he'll be okay." Chapter 12: Hope and Healing. As they waited together, Jia Li shared her account of the accident, recounting how she had tried to help. The family listened intently, gratitude shining in their eyes. "Thank you for your bravery," one of the men said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved his life." Hours passed, and eventually a doctor emerged from the operating room. "Mr. Fu is stable. He's in recovery now," he announced. A collective sigh of relief filled the waiting area, and Jia Li felt her heart swell with hope. She had played a small part in this man's journey, and it felt fulfilling. Chapter 13: A New Beginning. In the days that followed, Jia Li visited the old man in the hospital. His family welcomed her warmly, and she formed a bond with them as they shared stories and laughter amidst the uncertainty. Jia Li learned about Mr. Fu's life, his service in the military, and how he had dedicated himself to his family. She realized that every person had a story, a history that shaped who they were. As Mr. Fu recovered, Jia Li's resolve to become a nurse solidified. She wanted to help people like him, to be there in their moments of need. It became her mission, a calling that she embraced wholeheartedly. Chapter 14: The Future. Months later, as Jia Li enrolled in nursing school, she reflected on that fateful day. It had changed her life in ways she never expected. The experience had opened her eyes to the fragility of life and the importance of compassion. Jia Li knew that she would carry the lessons she learned with her always. She would strive to be a beacon of hope for others, just as she had tried to be for Mr. Fu. With her mother's support and the memories of that day guiding her, she stepped into her future with confidence, ready to make a difference in the world. Epilogue: A Lasting Impact. Years later, as a nurse, Jia Li often thought of Mr. Fu and his family. She had kept in touch with them, sharing milestones and celebrating life together. The bond they formed that day had become a cherished friendship. Jia Li continued to honor the values her mother instilled in her: compassion, bravery, and the importance of saving lives. She was proud to carry on the legacy of helping others, knowing that every small act of kindness could create ripples of change. In her heart, she knew that the old man's identity was not just a name on an ID card. It was a reminder of the connections that bind us all and the impact we can have on each other's lives.